I went to the opening night of Rascal Does Not Dream of a Dreaming Girl. It's the follow-up movie to the series Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai that we talked about last fall. My theater had a great turnout. Looking at chat, it sounds like that was a pretty common experience. Universally, big turnout, involved audience, good reactions. Aside from how the audience felt about it, I was kind of personally impressed at the number of elements the movie brought together. Right, there's the narrative and the characterization made match the series, I guess. It didn't seem like, sometimes you get movies that are just an aside or some kind of extra story, or they don't match what came before. Do you know what I'm saying? But this, I felt, integrated perfectly. That this was essentially like one of the many arcs we got during the series, just in one shot, a single cinematic experience. And it was just a very high impact film. Right. It was I said this already, but it was a wild ride. Like, I felt like I was doing a speed run through the entire emotional spectrum. Although I want to be doing the stream, part of me is like, I wish I could just go see it again right now. So, here is what we're going to do. I have little opening bits that I've written out, and then after that, we'll have a discussion and some Q&A about the finer points. You can obviously chat amongst yourself during that whole bit. I am in a weird situation here where I've only seen the work once and I can't refer back to it while sorting all this out, which is very different than how I normally try to write and analyze works. We will see how it goes, but just please forgive me if I overlook a detail or something slips my mind. But the way I want to structure this is based on the relationship between the first season and the movie, just so we have a kind of a loose framework. I went to this movie with someone who hadn't seen the series before, and she wasn't going to have any time to amend this, so I got her to at least watch the first 3 episodes, and then I tried to think of what the key parts of the other 10 episodes would be that she might need to know in order to have the context necessary to understand the movie. And even that was just based on my own guesses about how the story might play out. But that exercise got me thinking about what information one needed from the series to go into the movie. That is, what are the important things that help make it make sense? How does understanding the series improve your understanding of the film? All right, so that is kind of the main focus for this. The first thing to talk about is simply the number of things we will recognize or will accept because of having seen them before, as far as like all of the speculative fiction elements go. So, we've already seen someone creating a kind of simulation or complete imagining of the future during Koga's arc with the whole Laplace's demon thing. And importantly, we will know that you can hold on to the memories from such an imagined future because she and Sakata both do so. We will also have already seen an example of 2 versions of someone existing simultaneously and then being able to join back together because of what happens in Futaba's arc. We of course had the example of Sakata being able to pull back all the lost memories of someone like he does at the end of the movie, because it's also what he does at the end of that first arc with Mai. And throughout all of those arcs and this movie, we have that unifying attempt to explain what is happening with these quasi-physics metaphors. And trying to explain what are clearly supernatural occurrences with hard science ends up being a bit futile. But difficulty of trying to quantify what is happening is akin to the difficulty in trying to quantify the individuals. Try to quantify their hearts, or what moves them, or what worries them, or whatever. The whole series examines the complexity of characters, their sometimes conflicting desires, and the problems which arise from that. People cannot be reduced to equations or be made right with simple pat answers, no more than the simplified physics examples can explain the adolescent syndrome phenomena. Instead, people can only be helped by others who are willing to share in their experiences, to try to understand them and help them understand themselves. So, A second way the series is fundamental to understanding the movie is the way it continues the unifying pattern of experiences changing and molding the characters. The importance of these experiences is the main thing I want to emphasize in all this, how the characters are changed by what they go through. This is what the adolescent syndrome instances are in a nutshell, some watershed moment of crisis that leads to a change in who they are. The one who is at the center of those incidents each time is Sakata, and his influence helps each affected person come to a better place. But he himself was once also influenced in this manner in his own crisis, and the person who interceded was Shoko. In the series, he will have a dream of this key moment where Shoko will talk about how she thinks that life is here for us to become kinder. And importantly, he will ask her if it is okay for him to live his life like that too. And she will then also make a link between Sakata's trials and his own ability to understand others' pain. That because of these experiences, he can become kinder than anyone else. It's because of that shift in perspective that he keeps being kind and keeps putting himself out during all of the arcs in the series. It's what makes him the hero. It's what makes him the hero of the story, basically. But because of this pattern, both the characters in the story and the audience know what is going to happen when the truth of Shoko comes out. She lives on because Sakata dies in an accident and she receives his heart. If he doesn't die in the accident, she doesn't get the heart. Now, he never has to say out loud that it's his fate or that he's going to make sure she still gets the heart or whatever. Rather, the experiences both we and the characters have had with him in the series lead us to the same conclusion. Of course, he will still try to save Shoko, even at a cost to himself, because it's what he's done all along. It's why Mai will know to be there at the key moment, or why she tries to get them to keep taking trains as far away as possible. It's why other people begin conversations with him to try to persuade him to choose his own future, and so on. Even his own future self can't dissuade him. Left to his own devices, Sakata will give up his life, and all of us know it. Thus, the main obstacle of the story is the dilemma facing Shoko. She is trying both to stop Sakata's death and fulfill the anxiety of her younger self, who is uncertain she will get to have the experiences of an adult. But these are at cross purposes, because she'll get to be an adult if Sakata dies. So if there is a way to get those experiences and yet allow him to live, then that's what she hopes to pull off. This ends up explaining the surprising way she enters the film. It's a hilarious sequence, to be sure, but she seems so disruptive and aggressive at inserting herself into their life that she comes off as surprisingly selfish. This is a girl who we have only known as the selfless heroine who shows up at Sakata's lowest moments. It seems at odds with what we understand of her. There's even a visual metaphor to kind of emphasize this. Sakata pulling out the kotatsu is one of the first things that happens, and it remains there throughout the film, and it shows up in a lot of the scenes. Yes, it's a clear mark of winter, but it also represents the togetherness that they've built over the course of the story. They're even about to sit down and share a meal. And so Shoko coming and inviting herself to literally take a seat at the table is kind of a metaphoric upsetting of this order. It seems out of character. But then we learn that she is doing all this so that she is in a position to stop Sakata's death, both through trying to satisfy the anxiety of her fourth grade self and through interfering in the events that would lead to him being hit by the car. Her strategy for preventing the accident is to insert herself as an option for a Christmas Eve date and to choose exactly what she knows Mai is going to suggest. It's heartbreaking since we learn that Sakata was basically her first love too, but she is confident in this plan because she knows he will not choose her. Given the same location to meet, he will persuade Mai to change the plan when she brings it up later. There's actually kind of a clue that she understands and has been able to see the events leading to this when she makes a joke about being Schrodinger's Shoko earlier in the film. It suggests she is familiar with the first arc of the series and thus should be well aware of how Sakata and Mai feel about each other. Her strategy to save him depends on being right about him choosing Mai over her, and she is right. Unfortunately for her plan, Sakata figures this out in time to rush to the right place. Like we already said, Mai can also figure all this out based on what she knows of Sakata, and so is there to push him aside and die in his place. This was a very high-impact part of the film, I think. My theater was deathly silent throughout the scenes which followed. We'd experienced their blooming love and their rapport and the setbacks that they had tried to fight through, so we feel his loss as our own. And then, the experience of losing Mai changes something critical in Sakata. Throughout the story, Sakata keeps putting other people above himself. It's what makes him endearing, it's what makes him the hero. But having done that so long, and having developed so many people around him who love him and depend on him and would be sad if he was gone, the choice to give himself up is no longer helping everyone out. Now he is the cause of all kinds of sorrow for everyone else. Throughout all the other arcs, it's been almost as simple as just choosing what would help someone else over what he would want or would normally do. In this situation, though, he is not the only person who will bear the cost. Once he experiences the agony of Mai's death, he understands the kind of pain he will inflict on her and others. He can't understand without having the experience, though. Even when he calls his past self to explain, that self is unable to understand. It even questions if the future Sakata is really him. You cannot reason or persuade him into this perspective. He could only arrive at it through the experience itself, which echoes all of the other arcs and the disconnect I mentioned earlier about trying to quantify the human experience. So now he has two choices which both seem right, which both have their own kindness. The only reason he can make the selfish decision to stay alive is by walking through the experience of Mai's death. It's not for his own life that he changes his mind, but so that he can make Mai happy, so he can stop all the pain he would cause everyone else. Then, it becomes Shoko's turn to change due to experience. Once Sakata is able to make the choice to avoid the accident, we catch up to him a week later as he is at the bedside of the dying Shoko-chan. She then gets to experience his agony at losing her and how complicit he feels in her death, even if he's realized he can't choose another way. Seeing his agony lets her resolve the other problem she started with, the anxiousness of her fourth grade self. How does it solve this second obstacle? It's a question of having one desire override another. Her not wanting him to suffer like that becomes a stronger desire than receiving his comfort in her final days, and her sorrow over all the things she would miss out on if she doesn't live past 7th grade. Like him, it is only walking through the reality of saving him and seeing the agony she inflicts that she is able to choose between two things which both seem right. Thus, him giving his approval of the new version of her future plans, the little flower, it becomes kind of a confirmation and agreement between them all. Some reassurance to the 4th grade Shoko, who is dreaming all of this, that such a decision would be okay. It comes after Mai and Sakata agreed that they would risk things playing out a little differently if it was for Shoko's sake. They were confident enough in their bond to believe they could find each other again. What seems to happen is that she walks through a version of events in which her complete absence from Sakata's life changes events such that he doesn't get hit by a car on Christmas Eve. But some kind of subconscious memory remains in the people she affected, which results in Mai feeling compelled to star in the movie, which mirrors the events that we saw, and why Sakata feels compelled to donate to what I guess are charities that might have helped Shoko. I'm not sure exactly, having only seen it the once. What does happen for sure is that she avoids meeting him as Shoko-chan, as the 7th grader who now may die because of altering his path. That way, she spares him from the agony of her death and any feeling of responsibility toward her, even though it means giving up both her adult life and the comfort he was to her in her last days. It's only because of the experiences that she had that she can make this sacrifice. Now she is the one who is able to be kinder than anyone, giving up so much for people who will probably never even know who she is. And yet, whatever she did differently still worked out well. And so in this very last section, about the relationship between series and movie, what I want to talk about is the number of payoffs between the two, both forwards and backwards. For example, the reason we know things worked out and the arcs where Sakata saves each girl still happen is due to the details that we recognize in the end sequence. When you see them rewinding the memories as Sakata is falling asleep at the New Year, you realize Shoko really is going to try to reset things or whatever, and those memories will disappear. There is a tension then that things may work out differently without her hand in the story. Then we catch back up to January 6th, and the movie is able to rapidly reassure us through the details we recognize. We see things like Futaba with her hair in a ponytail, Kaede with her new haircut, Koga at the diner and obviously friends with Sakata, Nodoko being around and friendly, and so on. These little things have their origin in the arcs which helped these characters solve their crises and change, and so their presence means it's still played out the same way. After all, the characters can't stop and think how, it all still turned out the same, because they don't know it could have happened any other way. That's a major payoff to the uncertainty they introduce that we only recognize because of being familiar with the series and what those details mean. There are also several payoffs in retrospect to the series itself. For example, the very first time that Shoko and Sakata meet, she talks about how the horizon you can see its standing height, or eye level, is 4 kilometers away. But later, she will talk about how, kind of because of their different stature, they can actually see different distances, and relates it to the idea that there are as many worlds as there are people in them. But in retrospect, what she's also saying is that she can see farther. Because she has seen far into his future, the horizon that she knows, the limit of her experience, is much further than his. And it's, of course, the whole reason she's doing any of this. Additionally, on that same scene, or a different part of it, way back when we talked about the series last fall, I pointed out that in the very first conversation that Sakata has with her, that he comes across a little hostile, like he's trying to push her away, but she basically ignores the attempt. I thought then that this suggested she knew something about him or his future, that she wasn't happening across him by chance, but she was seeking him out specifically. In such a case, his initial reaction wasn't going to matter because she sought him out on purpose for some end. It was really the first clue that Shoko was outside the normal flow of the story, even before we met the young Shoko-chan. This is also why she is able to show up so conveniently when he is distraught over having the new Kaede, having Hiragana Kaede, disappear with the return of the original memories. This whole thing is just her dream, basically, so she can insert herself at just when it makes the most sense. I don't have a clip for this, but we also get an answer to something Futaba talked about. There was a point where she pointed out to Sakata that he was the only one who had seen the grown-up Shoko-san, which floats the possibility that she wasn't real and is some kind of manifestation of Sakata's. Now, after we've seen what happens when he goes back to the present and no one can see him, like when he rewound 4 days, and no one can see him except the person he's entangled with, which is a great bit. There was cheering in my audience when that happened. Now we've seen that, we can conclude Futaba might actually have been onto something. Shoko is linked to him because of their shared heart, so it may be that she really did only show up where he could see in all those past times, and then met him only when she knew that no one else would be around when she became fully present, or however you want to describe that. That then gives some context for a scene in the movie. Shoko is able to be seen by him. That is, he's the person who can find her because they share a physical heart. Yet after Mai dies, that is no longer true. She becomes the donor for Shoko. So why is she still able to be seen by him? Evidently, Mai's heart is also linked to Sakata, which is kind of heartwarming in hindsight. He was the one who was able to remember her when the rest of the world forgot, after all, and their affections only grew since then. As she said, it's likely that I am more in love with you than you think. And that parallel kind of works in reverse as well. The very last thing that happens in the film is Sakata catching a glimpse of Shoko-chan, who through some twist is alive and well, and perhaps recovering. And seeing her starts a cascade of memories, all the ones that got forgotten. It's a direct parallel to episode 3 clip, in which he remembers Mai and all the memories they formed. He can pull them back because of the strong bond between him, even when no one else could. When he is thus able to have the same recovery when seeing Shoko, we know that the bond and attachment he feels to Shoko is also incredibly strong enough to link them back together in this new actuality. There are several other payoffs, but I just want to talk about one more before we kind of have a little freer discussion. The title of this movie is Rascal Does Not Dream of a Dreaming Girl. This is literally true for this new timeline, or whatever you want to call it, the present. Shoko is the dreaming girl, but the rascal, Sakata, is not dreaming of her because he's forgotten. She made it so that he wouldn't know her and wouldn't know the agony of losing her. But it gets overturned right at the end when he catches sight of her on that ever-important beach and the whole flood of memories come back. The title was true, but turning it false means overcoming the crisis. It means winning the day. The title must be made untrue for a happy end. Well, that is just the case in the original series too. Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai describes that time in episode 3 when he's not dreaming of Mai, when he falls asleep and forgets her. He turns that into a happier end by remembering her during the whole kanji test and having those memories come back just as at the end of the film. So in both cases, the title is literally true at one point, but each of them is overturned for the same reason. The strong connection he builds to the two girls writes their memories so deep within him that they cannot be completely forgotten. Thus, we circle back to the power of experience in the series, the way it changes the characters and the perspectives, and the way it unites them again against the longest of odds. So that is my scripted part. That is my brief, in less than a day, attempt to make sense of the thing.